All sit down." The boys ranged themselves in rows on the grass before him, but Ralph and Piggy stayed a foot lower, standing on the soft sand. Jack ignored them for the moment, turned his mask down to the seated boys, and pointed at them with the spear. "Who's going to join my tribe?" Ralph made a sudden movement that became a stumble. Some of the boys turned toward him. "I gave you food," said Jack, "and my hunters will protect you from the beast. Who will join my tribe?" "I'm chief," said Ralph, "because you chose me, and we were going to keep the fire going. Now you run after food." "You ran yourself," shouted Jack. "Look at that bone in your hands." Ralph went crimson. "I said you were hunters. That was your job." Jack ignored him again. "Who will join my tribe and have fun?" "I'm chief," said Ralph tremulously, "and what about the fire? And I've got the conch." "You haven't got it with you," said Jack, sneering. "You left it behind. See, clever? And the conch doesn't count at this end of the island." All at once the thunder struck. Instead of the dull boom, there was a point of impact in the explosion. And so there's this emphasis here that Golding has put in. This crack of thunder that's extremely loud and violent is an indication that something significant has happened. And we just noticed that Jack said that the conch doesn't count here on his end of the island, as if there was no law at all on his end of the island. "The conch counts here too," said Ralph, "and all over the island." "What are you going to do about it then?" Ralph examined the ranks of boys. There was no help in them, and he looked away, confused and sweating. Piggy whispered, "The fire! Rescue!" "Who'll join my tribe?" "I will! Me! I will!" "I'll blow the conch," said Ralph breathlessly, "and call an assembly." "We shan't hear it." Piggy touched Ralph's wrist. "Come away. There's going to be trouble, and we've had our meat." There was a blink of bright light beyond the forest, and the thunder exploded again, so that a little one started to whine. Big drops of rain fell among them, making individual sounds when they struck. "Going to be a storm," said Ralph, "and you'll have rain like when we dropped here. Who's clever now? Where are your shelters? What are you going to do about that?" The hunters were looking uneasily at the sky, flinching from the stroke of the drops. A wave of restlessness set the boys swaying and moving aimlessly. The flickering light became brighter, and the blows of the thunder were only just bearable. The little ones began to run about screaming. Jack leapt onto the sand. "Do our dance! Come on, dance!" He ran stumbling through the thick sand to the open space of rock beyond the fire. Between the flashes of lightning the air was dark and terrible, and the boys followed him clamorously. Roger became the pig, grunting and charging at Jack, who sidestepped. The hunters took their spears, the cooks took spits, and the rest clubs of firewood. A circling movement developed and a chant. While Roger mimed the terror of the pig, the little uns ran and jumped on the outside of the circle. Piggy and Ralph, under the threat of the sky, found themselves eager to take a place in this demented but partly secure society. They were glad to touch the brown backs of the fence that hemmed in the terror and made it governable. So what's going on now is a storm is really starting to come down. It's starting to thunder and lightning. It's getting pretty scary outside. And so to kind of protect themselves, they begin to do this ritual tribal dance. And just the act of a routine is kind of a calming influence. Well, calming may not be the right word, but it certainly seems to protect them and seems to take away their fear. So now they're chanting in this circle. "Kill the beast! Cut his throat! Spill his blood!" The movement became regular while the chant lost its superficial excitement and began to beat like a steady pulse. Roger ceased to be a pig and became a hunter, so that the center of the ring yawned emptily. Some of the little ones started a ring of their own, and the complementary circles went round and round as though repetition would achieve safety of itself. There was the throb and stamp of a single organism. The dark sky was shattered by a blue-white scar. An instant later the noise was on them like the blow of a gigantic whip. The chant rose a tone in agony. "Kill the beast! Cut his throat! Spill his blood!" So they're protecting themselves from their fear by joining together, and there's comfort in this unity. Now, out of the terror rose another desire, thick, urgent, blind. Kill the beast! Cut his throat! Spill his blood! And this other desire may be almost like a madness that's coming over these boys. Again the blue-white scar jagged above them, and the sulphurous explosion beat down. The little ones screamed and blundered about, fleeing from the edge of the forest, and one of them broke the ring of Biggins in his terror. Him! Him! The circle became a horseshoe. A thing was crawling out of the forest. It came darkly, uncertainly. The shrill screaming that rose before the beast was like a pain. The beast stumbled into the horseshoe. Kill the beast! Cut his throat! Spill his blood! The blue-white scar was constant, the noise unendurable. Simon was crying out something about a dead man on a hill. Kill the beast! Cut his throat! Spill his blood! Do him in! So now you can see that the chant has changed. They've added a piece. Now that this quote-unquote beast has stumbled into their midst, they're still chanting, they're still mad with this fury, and now they're yelling, do him in, like kill him. The sticks fell, and the mouth of the new circle crunched and screamed. The beast was on its knees in the center, its arms folded over its face. It was crying out against the abominable noise, something about a body on the hill. The beast struggled forward, broke the ring, and fell over the steep edge of the rock to the sand by the water. At once the crowd surged after it, poured down the rock, leapt onto the beast, screamed, struck, bit, tore. There were no words and no movements, but the tearing of teeth and claws. So they've gone from being boys, even savage boys, chanting, to basically being like animals, tearing with teeth and claws. And remember, we've talked about atavism before. This is definitely atavism. Then the clouds opened and let down the rain like a waterfall. The water bounded from the mountaintop, tore leaves and branches from the trees, poured like a cold shower over the struggling heap on the sand. Presently the heap broke up and figures staggered away. Only the beast lay still, a few yards from the sea. Even in the rain they could see how small a beast it was, and already its blood was staining the sand. Now a great wind blew the rain sideways, cascading the water from the forest trees. On the mountain top the parachute filled and moved. The figure slid, rose to its feet, spun, swayed down through the vastness of wet air, and trod with ungainly feet the tops of the high trees. Falling, still falling, it sank toward the beach, and the boys rushed screaming into the darkness. The parachute took the figure forward, furrowing the lagoon, and bumped it over the reef and out to sea. Toward midnight the rain ceased and the clouds drifted away, so that the sky was scattered once more with the incredible lamps of stars. Then the breeze died too, and there was no noise save the drip and trickle of water that ran out of clefts and spilled down, leaf by leaf, to the brown earth of the island. The air was cool, moist, and clear, and presently even the sound of the water was still. The beast lay huddled on the pale beach, and the stains spread inch by inch. The edge of the lagoon became a streak of phosphorescence that advanced minutely as the great wave of the tide flowed. So this phosphorescence is like a glow. The clear water mirrored the clear sky and the angular bright constellations. The line of phosphorescence bulged about the sand grains and little pebbles. It held them each in a dimple of tension, then suddenly accepted them with an inaudible syllable, and moved on. Along the shoreward edge of the shallows the advancing clearness was full of strange moonbeam-bodied creatures with fiery eyes. Here and there a larger pebble clung to its own air and was covered with a coat of pearls. The tide swelled in over the rain-pitted sand and smoothed everything with a layer of silver. Now it touched the first of the stains that seeped from the broken body, and the creatures made a moving patch of light as they gathered at the edge. The water rose farther and dressed Simon's coarse hair with brightness. The line of his cheek silvered, and the turn of his shoulder became sculptured marble. The strange attendant creatures, with their fiery eyes and trailing vapors, busied themselves round his head. The body lifted a fraction of an inch from the sand, and a bubble of air escaped from the mouth with a wet plop. Then it turned gently in the water. Somewhere over the darkened curve of the world, the sun and moon were pulling, and the film of water on the earth planet was held, bulging slightly on one side while the solid core turned. The great wave of the tide moved farther along the island, and the water lifted. Softly surrounded by a fringe of inquisitive bright creatures, itself a silver shape beneath the steadfast constellations, Simon's dead body moved out toward the open sea. And with Simon, we have a loss of innocence. And I also want to mention these moonbeam-bodied creatures. Some people have suggested that they're jellyfish, and I don't know if that's accurate or not. That seems like an acceptable kind of explanation for these creatures. And what's happened is, whether or not they're jellyfish or whatever they are, they're these glowing phosphorescent creatures. The tide is moving them up onto the beach, so as the tide moves farther up the beach, so do the line of these glowing creatures. And they reach Simon. And to me, when it's talking about the sky and mirroring the ocean and all that, it's almost like Golding has these creatures acting almost as angels, grabbing Simon's body and pulling it out to his watery grave, as it were. So, just a really interesting passage there to me. I also want to mention that the quote-unquote beast, the guy with the parachute, also blew out to sea. So with Simon's body gone, and the body of this dead parachutist also gone, there's no evidence to say, well, you see, there never really was a beast. It was just a dead guy, or it was just Simon. So now there is no evidence. So now they can continue believing in this beast, even though we know that the beast was living within the boys. And Simon was trying to explain that to them and trying to explain the whole beast situation to them when they basically murdered him. So that's it for chapter 9. Next time we're getting into chapter 10.